Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio on this Monday, January 8th. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate you as always. Now, the great Don Fischer, the voice of the Hoosiers, with us. And Don, it was a busy weekend. Indiana men's team getting a gigantic win. Well, I shouldn't call it a gigantic win, but it was an important win over a very, very good Ohio State team. And Indiana currently finds themselves in a three-way tie for second place in the league at 3-1, which is much better place than a lot of other teams are. And it was a weird game. I know in talking about it afterwards, it was hard to put your finger on what it was. It was like, okay, well, that was kind of odd. Indiana gets out rebounded by 1,000. Really, it was like 49-27, I think. Yeah, that's exactly what it was, which was astounding.
That'd be 22, not 1,000.
Yeah, it seemed like 1,000. But to win a game, you get out rebounded by that much was crazy. And then, but on the other hand, Indiana took a limited number of turnovers from Ohio State, and man, did they make hay off of those things. So they did some things that they haven't done, but whatever it took, it got the job done.
Well, there's no question. The thing that I liked was the return of Xavier Johnson to his previous form compared to what he did in the Nebraska game leading up to the Ohio State contest, because his first time out against Nebraska, it looked like he was a lost puppy. He was trying to do way too much, especially considering playing with his teammates for the first time and probably only getting two or three practices in prior to playing that ball game. And I don't think they were physical practices for him because they were making sure that he didn't have some kind of a problem with the foot. But at the same time, I mean, this guy went out there on Saturday night against Ohio State, and I thought he just performed brilliantly. He was smart. He didn't try to force things. When he did go, like a helter-skelter to the basket, he was under control. He just played really good basketball and didn't have a single turnover in the ball game, which was a huge change from what Indiana did in that Nebraska game, because that's why they lost to Nebraska. Turned it over 19 times, gave up 27 points off those turnovers. Just a horrible performance from Indiana in that contest. And defensively in the game against Ohio State, they shut them down. I mean, that's a good Ohio State shooting basketball team. And in the second half of that game, they held them to 27%, I think it was. It was really a good defensive performance. And then they got something off the bench that they haven't had but one other time this year. That was C.J. Gunn performing like he was really knew what he was doing out there. And I don't want to put C.J. down in that regard, because sometimes he just gets in there and he goes 100 miles an hour. He's not under control. He shoots bad shots. In this game, he was 4 for 7, 1 of 2 from the three-point line. Scored 10 points, played good at the defensive end, under control, kept the guy in front of him, which is what he sometimes doesn't do. He gets up into a guy and the guy goes right around him instead of just hanging back a little bit and using his athleticism and his length to help him play defense. In this game, he did that, and he got to stay on the floor, and he really performed well. So there were some real pluses coming out of this ball game.
Yeah, and going back to Xavier, he plays 34 minutes in his second game back. That's a lot, first of all. But he was so unbelievably efficient. 18 points, 4 of 9 shooting, 2 of 2 behind the arc. But he got to the free throw line to shoot 11 free throws, hit 8 of those, and so but the no turnovers on top of that for Indiana, and they only had 1 in the entire second half, 4 for the ball game. And that was and you talk about return to form. I just watching him, I remember he was bringing the ball up the floor once, and then he just hit a gear, and it's like wham, he just starts passing people. Indiana has not had that since he's been out, and that makes things difficult for defenses. You have to adjust for a guy that just blows by you.
Well, I think it points out how much this team has missed him since he was not on the floor. They missed him all of last year, basically. I mean, he played in the 11th game is when he got hurt. And when he wasn't there, Indiana just didn't have that same burst that Xavier Johnson has at both ends of the floor. And this year, now they lose him for the whole month of December, playing some of their toughest games, and he's not there. And it factors into this ball club. There's no question about it. And Gabe Cupps is a wonderful addition to this team, but he is not Xavier Johnson yet. And he will be at some point because he is a smart kid. He knows how to play, and he'll get the ball where it needs to go. And obviously, I think he'll improve his shooting as well. But when you haven't got a guy like Xavier Johnson on your team to help run the show, and let's face it, he's an alpha male. He's the guy running the show. He knows he's the guy running the show, and he wants to run the show. And you have to have that player out there. And Indiana has missed that a lot. So with Xavier back, and if he continues to perform like he did in this game against Ohio State, Indiana's going to be just fine.
Yeah, and Indiana can start to build on that. They were kind of in a no man's land prior to that without Xavier. They weren't really, the offense was just not improving. It was just kind of in a spin cycle. And now you can see some improvement, but that's going to open up a lot of things for a lot of different guys, whether it's Mackenzie Mbako, Khalil Ware, whomever, Malik, no matter whom it might be. But when you've got a guy that can just do so many different things, not forgetting the defense, the defensive part along with that, and the growth of CJ Gunn, huge. His confidence, you could see, man, it grew in that game.
Well, let's hope it continues that way because consistency hasn't been his strong suit. If CJ can play like that and continue to improve, can shoot that way, because 4 of 7 for him, that's like lights out. That's like lights out shooting, and he's known as a shooter. He was known as a shooter through high school, but he has not performed that way in the year plus that he's been at Indiana. And finally, he comes into his own in this ball game against Ohio State. Hopefully that spins him into a positive cycle for the rest of the year, because there's no doubt his athleticism, his length, he's 6'6", he's quick. His biggest problem defensively is getting into guys and then having them go right around him, because he gets lost on defense sometimes. You got to understand the concepts of defensive basketball, and communication is such a critical thing. I think that's one of the reasons Nebraska blew him away, because there was no communication defensively in that ball game. And they just didn't have and the switches, they didn't execute the game plan defensively. And Woodson has talked about this ad nauseum at this point with this ball club, about what they have to do to be a good defensive team. This team is his worst thus far. I mean, out of the 3 seasons he's been at Indiana, this team right now looks to be one that's not playing the same kind of defense as the first 2 years. If these guys get back to playing that kind of defense consistently, they're going to be trouble for everybody. But that's a big key. And right now, we're not seeing it on a consistent basis.
No, we did see some toughness in the game against Ohio State. They had to dig back after getting down, and they did so. Now they have to go on the road to a place that has not been friendly to them, although this is not the type of Rutgers teams that Indiana has faced here of late. They're not quite as strong, but it's still a road game in the Big Ten, which is always a tough task. But this is a game that Indiana could really do itself some great good by sneaking out of there with a win, not just in the conference race, but just overall for themselves, for their overall tournament resume. Because anytime you can sneak out a road win, man, you have to grab it, because it's going to be tough going in this conference this year. But this is a great opportunity for them to follow up on what they did the other night.
Well, it is. And the fact that Rutgers is 0-3 in the league at this point, has struggled a little bit this year, but here's what they're going to face. They're going to face a team that believes they can beat Indiana, because they've been able to do it since 2018. It's a ball club that Steve Peichel is one of those guys. He gets his kids to play as hard as anybody in the league, and they are very good at the defensive end. And the Omoro kid, I'm spacing on how to pronounce his name, Omorie. That's how we used to pronounce it, because they've changed it twice since I've been here, since I've been doing Rutgers games. But
it must rhyme with an award.
Well, Clifford is his first name, and we're going to call him Clifford for this purpose right now. But at any rate, that guy is a shot blocking guy. He's a great rebounder. He's a physical presence out there. He's going to give Khalil Ware trouble. And Khalil had some problems in this ball game against Felix Akpara for Ohio State. He did not play his best basketball game because of Akpara and how well he played at the contest. That was one of the reasons Indiana got out rebounded in this game, 49-27, because Khalil wasn't as effective as he needs to be. And obviously Akpara changed the whole game situation from a Khalil perspective. I mean, Khalil just didn't do well against this guy, and it's going to be kind of the same scenario against Omorie if, in fact, he can't play his normal game. So that's the one thing Khalil's got to get used to, too, the physicality of this Big Ten. And when it's been physical for him, he has struggled a little bit.
Absolutely. So, and this game is tomorrow night, so it comes quick for Indiana. They have to bounce back from that win and just forget about that one and go think about winning on the road in a place where they've had great difficulty. But like I said, this would be huge for Indiana. Currently sitting in a three-way tie for second in the league at 3-1 with Purdue. And I forget whom else. I was just looking at that. But this would just a 4-1 start in the league with a home game coming would be great for that Indiana team.
Well, there's no doubt. Right now, you've got to win this ball game. There's no question, because Rutgers is not what they have been. They're just not as good as they've been in the past years. But we know how difficult it is to win at the rack. It's going to be another test, to say the least. They're going to play really hard at the defensive end. They've struggled to score the basketball. You can't allow them to get out and start shooting threes. And here's the thing. Everybody in this league, it seems to me, with the exception of Indiana, can shoot a volume number of three-point shots. I mean, the last 5 games that Indiana has played, 4 of those games, teams shot 32 or more threes against them. I mean, that's just phenomenal. If you think about the numbers involved here, we're talking about 3-point shots now, 32 to 38 3-point shots in the 4 of the last 5 ball games, and 27 of those shots were taken by Ohio State, and Indiana shut them down. So when you think about what Indiana is able to do defensively when they're on the same page, that's huge. If they can get the rebounding thing taken care of, and I think that they will, and that's something certainly I'm sure Mike Woodson has emphasized here the last couple of days of practice. I think this team with X back and playing the kind of basketball he played, but that's what it's going to take. It's not going to be, you can't have letdowns and you can't have guys that aren't performing at the defensive end, but it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, the rebounding, I think, partly is because of all those 3-point shots. You get some weird bounces, but at the same time, Indiana was really breaking toward the basket defensively a lot against Ohio State. So while Ohio State was crashing the boards and successfully coming up with the ball a lot of the time. So that seemed to be part of the reason there. And sometimes it worked out. We saw some breakouts, runs by Indiana, several, but that disparity in rebounds, that's going to get you beat in a lot of games.
There's no doubt. Rebounding has been an issue for this ball club. They have not dominated the boards in any way, shape, or form at this juncture. And you've got Ware, who's a 7-foot guy who's very capable, and he's long, and he gets a share of rebounds, but he's got to understand how physical this league is, and that's part of the reason that he struggled last year, I think, at Oregon. Because of the physicality of guys playing against him. And he's a skilled guy. He is one of those guys that can shoot the basketball from out. He's got great skills from a shooting perspective. He knows how to play the game. He's just got to become more of a physical presence out there for Indiana if they're going to be as successful as they hope to be.